Hey everybody, it's Lisa Stone and I am here with my son, Morgan. Morgan, say hey.
How's it going?
Morgan is up in San Jose. I'm down in San Clemente, which is in Southern California. And Morgan, we've talked about doing this before and we just never did it. There was a period of time where I didn't feel like it was a good idea to do it. Now it seems like a good idea. And I'm really excited that you were willing to come do this with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Sure. Hey, hang on one second. Dad's phone's ringing. All right, I'm turning that off. So can you tell everybody kind of your story of how you started playing tennis, just, in the neighborhood and your earliest memories of playing tennis?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't remember that much of it. Like, it was so early. I was really young. I remember I was playing multiple sports. I was playing soccer, then baseball. And then one summer, I think you guys put me in tennis camp in the neighborhood. And I liked it more than the other sports that I was playing. And I seemed to be better at it naturally. So just kind of ran with that. There wasn't too much to it.
Well, and you started playing, I don't know if you remember this, but you played on an Alta team in the neighborhood, an 8 and under team when you started. And I think you were 6 when you first played. And that was kind of your first foray into tennis competition. It was very low key, but do you have any memories of that?
Yeah, I honestly had forgotten about that, but yeah, I do remember playing on a team with a couple of the guys in the neighborhood who ended up being on like the high school team, I believe.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think what I liked most about it was I was coming out of like soccer and baseball, which were team sports, and it would always piss me off when, we'd lose because people did stuff that I would like if I was performing and we would still lose, that made me mad. Or, if we won and, other people weren't doing anything, I was just annoyed. So I kind of liked the kind of solo aspect of tennis, where if you lost, it was on you. If you won, it was on you.
Yeah. And so the summer that you turned, I think it was you were 9. You got invited by one of your buddies to go to Uga Tennis Camp.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that experience or your memories of your summers at UGA?
Yeah, they were good. That's probably what fueled the kind of desire to play college tennis initially. We would just go and we'd stay in the dorms for a couple weeks, or it was a week or 2. I forget how long it was.
A week.
A week. And then, so we'd stay in the dorms. We'd wake up early, go work out, go to the main cafeteria on campus. You're in the middle of all these college students. We'd go and work out on the UGA tennis courts for a couple hours. We'd had a break, work out again, and go hit again. It was like an intense workout, intense tennis regimen for a 9-year-old looking back, but it was fun at the time, for sure. And that's what kind of fueled it.
And you came back from that first summer at Georgia saying, I want to play college tennis. I want to play at Georgia. I want to start playing tournaments. And I had no idea how to make that happen for you. And so we ended up finding a coach for you that could kind of guide us on that process, get you ready to play tournaments and all of that. Do you have any memories of those first years at the Riverside Club with Noel and Grant and Brian?
Yeah, and Tony, right?
Tony came later. He was there, but he came later, yeah.
Yeah.
Cliff. Yeah.
Yeah. That was so long ago. I guess.
Well, you were little.
Yeah. What's kind of the question? Like, just memories in general, or like?
Yeah, do you remember kind of that whole time of, okay, now I'm not just taking one lesson a week in the neighborhood on the courts, but I'm going to like this organized program where these kids are playing tournaments, and Melanie Udan was training there. I mean, there were people, kids that were older than you doing some pretty high level stuff with their tennis. Do you have any memory of that, and kind of how that inspired you or didn't?
I'm not necessarily sure it inspired me, but it was probably the first environment. I mean, it was the first environment I had been in where people were kind of like taking everything very, very seriously. Yeah, I feel like I had a lot of problems there, to be honest. Like I just kept getting into it with people because they're like guys older than me who had been playing for years before me.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like on the same court with them, and there were a lot of issues. I just remember that mainly. Like, if there's something specific, I don't know, but just in general, it's kind of tough.
Well, I think at that point was kind of the first time for me that I got pretty seriously involved with your tennis too. And you have two older sisters, and each of them had gone through different interests that, being the parent at home most of the day, I was the one that ended up usually taking y'all to whatever practice or lessons or whatever. And I feel like when you moved over to Riverside, that was kind of the first time where it was a pretty much everyday thing. After school, we'd, load up the car, drive over to the courts, and you would train and I would hang out, and you started playing tournaments. And
yeah, the coolers of food and drinks and crazy concoctions. I remember that.
Yeah. And snacks.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, at that point is when you started playing tournaments, and you and I started having some intense together time, whether it was a local tournament or traveling around. What are some of your memories of kind of that time together? Because it wasn't always, happy, and we didn't always get along perfectly. I mean, we definitely had our conflicts from time to time, but when you talk to friends of yours who maybe didn't grow up with a focus like you grew up with, do you see a difference in your relationship with me and Dad versus maybe some of your friends and their relationships growing up with their parents, or not so much?
I mean, yeah, definitely. I think, I'm way closer with you guys than any of my friends are with their parents. That's blatantly obvious. But, I think whether it was tennis or something else, it was still going to happen. Obviously, you and I spent a freakish amount of time together doing the tennis stuff. But I think whether it was like if I got into drums earlier, if I stuck with soccer or baseball, like it would have happened regardless. So I mean, yeah, we spent a lot of time together, which for sure, like I don't know, it kind of created more of like it was an interesting dynamic because we tried to play it as like friend dynamic. It was very split. Like part of the time we were more of friends, and then the other time you guys would be trying to lay down authority. And I think that's probably why it was such an issue to do that, because the other half of the time, we were on a kind of a friend level versus, the 100% authority all the time.
If you could rate our parent-child relationship on a scale of 1 to 10, like in terms of being a good tennis parent or a really terrible tennis parent, where do I fall? Be honest.
As a tennis parent or as a parent?
As a tennis parent first.
I mean, looking back, probably a 10. But
In the moment,
like I hated you sometimes for sure.
Yeah.
But you were intense, but it's not like you were asking anything that was crazy, except for like later when I really hated it. But at the times, like it was just a matter of trying to hold me to stuff that I said I was going to do, and like looking back at your actions were probably derived from the fact that you were spending an ungodly amount of time, putting your own effort and your own time into it as well. And it wasn't, I was putting a lot as well, but you as a parent were doing a lot too. So it kind of justifies some things. But like
So,
overall, I would say like, yeah, looking back, like some people had it terrible. Some people, like I grew up with people whose parents would smack them after a match, like that never happened with us. Like you guys, we would yell at each other, but it was just because we were both invested. So yeah, I would say 10 as a tennis parent.
and as a parent, dare I ask?
Overall or
Yeah,
at times?
no, overall.
Overall, I'll give you a, like, I don't, okay, if you want to be like completely honest, I'd give you like a 9.2 for a tennis parent. And I'll give you like a 9.5, a 9.7 for a parent.
Okay.
Yeah. But there were times I would have told you like a 2 for
Yeah.
sure.
Oh, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So you came up in tennis. At first you were like all in. You loved it. You wanted to play at Georgia. You were like invested. I remember the summer before your sophomore year of high school, I think, we went to Davis Cup in Austin, and you had just switched coaches right before we did that. You were moving over to Old Town. And while we were in Austin, you spent some time training at Austin Tennis Academy, and like Andy Roddick was your big hero at that point. And so we got to go and see Andy compete in Davis Cup in Austin. That was pretty exciting. Shortly after that, though, I feel like there was a shift, and you kind of started not loving tennis so much, and in fact maybe started hating tennis. But I wasn't really aware of that. Do you know what caused that shift for you? Did you feel burned out? Were there other things tugging at you for your attention and your time, or was it something else? Do you remember what the triggers were?
The biggest trigger was when y'all gave me the ultimatum of having to go to Spain. Like
That was a year later, though.
Okay, that was the biggest trigger. What killed the passion for it, though? That was
Okay.
like, okay, I'm not doing this for me anymore. But before that, I mean, it's probably just getting older and, talking to people who weren't doing a crazy commitment like that and realizing that it wasn't, that great. I was just in my bubble, and, there was a world outside of it. And, every time I wanted to be a part of something, I couldn't because of tennis, and it pissed me off. So I hated not having the freedom that other people had.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would say at that point I was aware, but I didn't start like hating it until y'all sent me to Spain.
That was it. That was the turning point for you. Yeah, you came back from that trip, and that next year was pretty rough. But you were still committed to wanting to play tennis in college. And you, after that Spain trip, was when we started coming out to California more, and you got connected with some of the coaches out here and some guys out here that you would hit with. And that seemed to kind of re-spark things for you. Am I remembering that right?
I mean, kind of. Not necessarily. I mean, like a little bit tennis wise, but mainly just like the ability and kind of the realization that it could take me to where I was when I was actually enjoying it. Like every situation that you're thinking of right now, when I was in California looking at schools and hitting with people, say it right there. I was in California. I was with, people that I got along with, and people that, weren't just little tennis freaks all the time. So yeah, it was more enjoyable to be in that environment and play tennis. But it was still like whenever I would come home, I wasn't very happy with it still.
Right. You seemed happy out here. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, like, switching academies too, like it was way less intense at Old Town. Like we were at a different stage, so if I was younger and moved there, I probably would have said it was more intense. But given where I was and who was there with me, like the whole kind of environment of it was way less intense, and so it was easier to enjoy.
So you did enjoy it while you were there because you had friends there. Y'all hung out. There were people you went to school with, and right.
I enjoyed being in that environment, not necessarily
the social piece of it. Right.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. And so, okay, and the summer before you were going to college, you came out to California for a couple months, and one of your buddies came out with you, and y'all hung out, and then it was time for college. And I don't really want to focus so much on your college recruiting process because you covered that pretty well with Eddie in your podcast last week, which I've shared everywhere. So for people interested in hearing more about that, they should go listen to that podcast, but because y'all did a great job. One of the things that I found interesting was you had to choose a major when you went off to college. And I would love to hear like what your thought process was around choosing a marketing/business major, and what you, at the time you were entering college and had to declare a major, what you thought you were going to do with that.
Yeah, there wasn't too much thought around it. It was more that, I was already in the recruiting process, and I had never been a school person and wasn't thinking about school at all, and so I didn't really put too much of my own kind of research into what I could do with it. It was more so everybody above me. Like, I hung out with older guys who were about to be going to college or who were already in their first year of college, whatever, and like 90% of them were business majors, and said, that kind of left the door open to do whatever they wanted. Which, now looking back, it makes sense because none of us really knew anything besides tennis at the time, Right. So, sorry, there's bees around here.
Don't get stung.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was mainly just to kind of put off really finding out what I wanted to be doing. It looked like the option that would leave the most doors open moving forward.
And you knew, I mean, there was never a point that I can remember where you said, I want to play tennis professionally.
Right.
You stuck your toe in it.
Yeah. I mean, there was no aspiration to be pro, except for maybe a minute when I was younger. But I mean, I played a pro tournament and got slaughtered. So I realized there was no chance in hell of getting money from it. And so it wasn't going to continue after college. And I wanted to be able to make money after college. So I think the business degree kind of just, again, left the most doors open. Right.
Your senior year, you transferred twice during college. Again, you talked about that in your podcast with Eddie. You transferred twice, and after your sophomore year, you actually stopped playing tennis in college and just focused on getting through and graduating. I won't say you focused on your schoolwork because school, like you said, that was never a huge priority, but graduating was a big priority. And getting that degree seemed to be a priority. Am I saying that correctly?
I mean, not necessarily a priority. It was just like I had to get it done to get to my priorities. Like, I couldn't move forward if I wanted to get to the things I actually wanted to do. So I mean, kind of.
So you saw it as a necessity.
Yeah, it was a necessity. It wasn't a desired priority.
Got it. And
I will say that I did focus on school a lot during my sophomore year because I was taking so many classes at Boise State trying to get into San Jose State under the radar.
Right.
So I was probably focusing more on school than tennis that year, to be honest.
Well, you took a ton of courses and a ton of hours, and really got creative about how to get yourself back to Southern California, back to California, to the Bay where you wanted to be, which I thought was really admirable. And you had a plan, and you executed your plan, and you did your research, and you got people in your corner to help you achieve that goal of getting back to the Bay. Once you got back to the Bay and
y'all didn't really think that at the time, though, right?
No, I think by the
you guys were not in favor of me moving until like February when I had everything in place and told you how bad it was.
Yeah, no. At first we weren't so supportive. We weren't not supportive, but we were just kind of taking a back seat and letting you drive the bus at that point, which you did very well. I mean, you took control of it and figured out what you needed to do to get where you wanted to be. and made that happen. Once you got back to the Bay, though, once you got to San Jose State and were, trying to focus on getting through school, it became time to start thinking about a job after college. When you first started kind of thinking about what am I going to do after I graduate and I don't have to be in class every day, how did you decide what jobs to start looking at?
Well, what was I looking at initially? I think I was initially just looking up like market stuff, and because that was my major, but I wasn't finding anything that was like of appeal. And when I did interviews for them, they were actually just like kind of in-person sales stuff. A lot of the marketing ads just kind of bait you by saying marketing, when really in reality they're like stand in front of Costco and sell stuff.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was back in California. I was already kind of making music.
We're going to talk about the music in a second.
Well, right, but that kind of connects to what kind of jobs I was looking for, because I got into the weed industry. I worked as a bud tender at a dispensary for a year and a half, which was partially due to the fact that it gave me a ton of freedom, and the work environment wasn't stressful. I could come home and not have work to do. I could come home and all my creative juices were still flowing. So I was actually looking into the cannabis industry a lot. I had like 3 or 4 interviews with different places.
And so that's where you thought you wanted to be. And even the company...
I wanted to do like marketing for the cannabis industry. And that's what I was initially looking at when I moved in, and later didn't work out, as but
right.
That was kind of the goal, was to get in, and I saw it as kind of a industry that was going to go up.
And so when that didn't pan out, now you're working in the tech industry, and do you call Uga? Is Uga considered a startup? I don't really know the terminology.
I mean, technically, yeah, it'd be a startup, but by no means are we small. So,
right. And you're doing sales for them. And I'm interested to hear your take on when you were going through the interview process for these different jobs. You've shared with us that on your resume, it said that you played Division I college tennis, and that would come up in your interviews. Can you talk a little bit about how that looked, what kinds of things you were asked, and how those conversations went?
Yeah, it was definitely the main talking point of most of my interviews. That initially, before like music took off, it was the main point, but it still like came up later too. It was mainly the first question. Oh, so you played Division I tennis? How'd that go? And I would be straight up and tell them it went like shit. Sorry, but which kind of like, I feel like established kind of a sense of trust between me and the interviewer, because they're like, oh, okay, kind of taken aback. And I was interviewing in the cannabis industry, where people who drop out of high school can get into. So it was definitely a main talking point. It asked me kind of what I took away from that, what was my experience like, and then they would talk about like any team stuff that I would have to overcome, or any difficult point in in those years that I would have to overcome, or anything that it taught me. Yeah.
And what were your answers?
When they would ask me what was difficult about it, I would say, being in a place I didn't want to be in. When they'd ask me what I learned from it, probably the relationship building the most. Is what I would talk about, just because we started the recruiting process super early, and I feel like just kind of growing up in the household that I did, it was mainly focused on, if you want something, develop a relationship and get it that way. And so I talked a lot about the ability to kind of sell myself and my tennis abilities, and how that could translate to either selling weed or selling educational technology. And
Kind
it
of
does.
opposite ends of the spectrum, but hey.
I mean, it does. Like the college recruiting process for tennis. I mean, if you're not a blue chip, you know, you're having to sell yourself if you're trying to get to the top schools. You know, as a 4-star, a high 4-star, but you know, the schools I wanted to go to, it was mainly me initiating and me checking in and me following up as opposed to being chased after. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So talked about kind of the relationship building and kind of the ability to sell my skills and my abilities.
And now that you are in a sales position, do you feel like you've even, you know, that you've tapped into those experiences to help you be successful? Because you're having really good success at your job.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily attribute my success in my job to tennis at all. To be honest, I just think it's something
Well,
I'm good at.
I'm talking about the what you were talking about, marketing yourself as a recruit. Now you're marketing a product. It's not you, but it's you doing the marketing.
Yeah, I feel like that was just more of an in to get the job. Like it's more of I hope bosses don't watch this, but I mean, if you played a college sport, use it to your advantage, manipulate that conversation in the interview and make it seem like, you know, you took away a whole bunch, even if, you know, didn't necessarily. So I really don't think it's helping me and my job at all. Like I don't think that translates.
I feel like there's some areas of sales that are, I don't know, and I haven't worked in sales in a really long time, but where, you know, there's a lot of rejection involved in sales. I mean, you're on the phone most of your workday, you know, making phone calls and getting people either not answering or hanging up or saying no. Um, Anytime you're in a competitive environment, I mean, you definitely had streaks in your junior tennis years where you weren't winning very much, and you know, having to have that resilience to come back and train the next day or play the next tournament, to me seems similar to being in a sales position where you're getting hung up on or told no and having to pick up the phone and make that next call. So maybe it's not directly related, but
I mean,
you
it's
know,
just a decision to want to make more money
and to
personally.
be successful, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you're there to be successful, so you're going to do what it takes to make that happen.
I would say I'm competitive, but like I was competitive before the tennis too. So, you know,
You think you came out that way? It's just in your
yeah,
DNA.
I think being placed in our house with, you know, all the factors probably made me quite competitive from birth.
And being the youngest.
Being the youngest, given a girl's name, raised in the South, like it made me pretty competitive for sure.
Yeah, you've always been kind of feisty. I will say that. So let's talk about your music, because that's your passion. And, you know, I remember when you were younger and you would talk about your goals with tennis, and the adults that I was in contact with that weren't in the tennis world would say, oh, how cool that he's got this goal and he's so young and he's willing to put the work in toward that goal. And you've always been very goal oriented. I feel like you've, you know, identified something that you wanted and you've put the effort in and gone after it. So for a while it was tennis, then it stopped being tennis somewhere along the way, probably your freshman year of college, transitioning into your sophomore year of college, where you really got into the music stuff. I mean, I know the passion went away before that, but you were still working for it for a
Yeah.
while. During your sophomore years, when you discovered your passion for music, and you had kind of this fluky thing happen with a song. Do you want to talk about that a little bit with Yari?
Yeah, so that was actually my junior year that happened.
Oh, right.
So
You were back in the Bay.
yeah, I like started like making mixes and DJ stuff and like learning how to DJ and you know, should I actually get a show in the future, be able to be prepared for that for a few months. But I mean, that's all it takes to become a DJ is just, you know, few months practice, and then you realize if you actually want to take it anywhere, you got to get into the music side. So that came more on the junior year. And yeah, I mean, I was making music. It was decent. It was technically wrong. You know, I wasn't doing anything by the rules because I didn't learn anything. I was just kind of teaching everything myself. But yeah, one night I was, you want me to like be fully like transparent here or what?
You can edit a little bit.
I mean, I don't know. I'm gonna just say I was sitting in my room about to, take a bong hit.
Living in California where it was legal. Let's just, yes.
Right.
Okay.
And it was a big glass piece. And when I pulled the bowl out, it was like I had just cleaned it, so it was fresh. And when I pulled the bowl out of it, it made a crazy sound. And so I was literally about to smoke, and then I decided to record the sound instead. And I, like, over the course of the next 4 hours, made a song after sampling the sound of the bong stem a couple different ways, and posted it on Twitter, and it blew up and got millions of views and stuff. So the music kind of took off.
Okay, but let's back up a little, because the process of that was what was so interesting to me watching from across the country at the time. So you posted the first thing where it was just the sound, right? And you built a whole social media campaign around that. It wasn't just you posted that and then you posted a song. So talk about that process, because that's what's so fascinating to me.
Yeah, fair enough. It was actually kind of like a few day, but it was like a few day process, but it consumed like the next 3 weeks of my life. And, every other aspect of my life kind of floundered during that for the first time. I posted the initial video and it instantly blew up. And so this was, I don't know when it was, 8 p.m., 9 p.m. at night, and it started to take off. And then I think the next day it was really blown up. So I was like, okay, I should probably finish this. And so I was replying to literally every single comment that people were posting. If you go back and look at that original video, there was not a single comment that I missed to reply to. And, I had seen other people on socials do it, and you just when you're getting that traction, you got to make sure it sticks. So, as I was saying, it kind of happened early. The music stuff took off earlier than it should have based on where my skill was. So that kind of lit the fire under me to kind of build a whole brand around it. I'd already technically created the brand, the Stone brand, whatever, but it wasn't anything. I had no following. I don't think I guess I had a logo, but there was no real theme or anything at all at that time. But that kind of initiated the pressure too. So I replied to every single person. I was plugging my SoundCloud to every single reply. Over the next 24 hours, I guess, I finished the song. It's produced terribly. I'll never play it out, but
but you were posting snippets all along the way too.
Right. There was 2 or 3 snippets over the course of 24 hours. And at that point it was already huge. So I decided to release it literally in the middle of the night at 4:20 in the morning. And so, yeah, that was kind of that process. But I mean, since then I don't know, how deep do you want me to go into that?
Go. I mean, I think the whole process is really fascinating. And, I think I know you don't attribute it to your tennis, and maybe it's simply a personality trait of yours rather than being due to any activity you participated in. But I was blown away at your ability to really parlay that initial interest in what you were doing into an entire social media campaign and a brand, and to get yourself invited to perform. I mean, it went from, my kids fiddling around on a computer with music, making these songs that I don't really understand, to all of a sudden, this big following on social media. I thought it was fascinating.
Yeah, sorry. Nova's like on a bench.
Oh.
That is not stable. Nova, get
Okay.
off there.
Nova's the dog, for those of you not familiar.
The drugged up dog after surgery, standing on things that wobble. Anyway, yeah, so after that happened, it was kind of, I realized like I could let it slide or I could fake it till I make it. Because, you know, the main thing, I was getting a ton of new followers, a lot of traction, and everybody was like asking me where to find my music and what other songs I had out and yada yada. And like, I didn't have anything. Like, I had no finished songs. I had never played a show. I had like wasn't in the industry at all. I had no connections with people. But every time somebody would ask, I would be like, yeah, you know, it's got stuff coming out soon. Like, yeah, like, oh, you want me to come there? Like, yeah, I'll talk to your promoters. Like, get me out there, blah, blah, blah. And just kind of faked it till I made it. And, you know, in doing that, there was a girl out in Canada who like found that video. It was really like a couple weeks later, found that video, and was asking me if I ever played shows in Canada. And I was like, no, but I would love to. And she's like, oh, well, actually, my friends are throwing a festival here. Like, if you'd be down to play, I can plug your stuff to them. And I was like, yeah, great. Like, send them over my information, and like, if it works out, like, we can talk. And I was just kind of like playing it cool. And she actually set it up to where they booked me to play that show up in Canada, which was an opportunity to get content. You know, in the music industry, if you don't have the persona online, you're basically screwed. Like, there's no way for you to get your name out otherwise. And in order to do so, you have to have stuff out there that looks like you know what you're doing. So we got a bunch of photos and videos taken of the setup there, like hyped it up on socials, like made it out to be way bigger than it was. And it worked. You know, people like hopped on the train. Like, people are sheep. That's just how it works. So yeah, since then it's been kind of a steady flow of, you know, establishing relationships and actually putting out good music and getting recognized and playing legitimate shows with people that, you know, I look up to. So kind of crazy.
I want to talk about your podcast that you did with Eddie last week, because it's funny. We follow each other on social media, and he had interviewed you for a print article a few years ago, I think. And, but the two of you met in Spain at that, the academy that you said made you really go, oh my God, I hate this.
Well, it was partially the academy, but partially how you guys like handled that. So
yeah, it was not our best parenting moment. But you and Eddie stayed in touch. Eddie's from Mexico, and he also played college tennis, and he's now doing this podcast, and he interviewed you for that. And one of the things I found really interesting was seeing the comments on the podcast of your music contacts, your music connections, who had no idea about your tennis life at all, right? They were like, yeah. Oh, I didn't know you played tennis. You know, we'll have to get out and hit sometime or whatever. And
some of those
laughing.
Guys are like world touring DJs. You don't even know.
Right. Well, I'm still learning about the house music world, but yeah. So where is tennis going to be in your life long term, do you think? If it's going to be in your life long term?
Nowhere for the time being. I mean, I have no desire to play, especially not competitively. Like,
right.
I've kind of flipped, and it's not just tennis; it's kind of sports in general. I just kind of scoff at now. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, why are you using all your time for that? So for the time being, for the foreseeable future, it's nowhere. The next time I'll play tennis is with Jack. We've got a deal running that, you know, the next time either of us picks up a racket, it'll be with each other. And Jack is my former roommate at Boise State and one of my best friends who now lives in London.
Former roommate and teammate. Y'all played together at Boise State.
Former roommate and teammate, and kind of in the same position. Hates it now too. And so, we've made the deal that next time either of us picks up a racket, we'll be with each other. But I mean, I don't know. It's just kind of like an artifact from my past. It's kind of like, it's funny to me. It's like a funny talking point. It's not, I would never talk about it like, oh, I did that and I achieved that. It's like, yeah, like, look where I am now. Isn't it kind of funny to look at what I was?
Except you did achieve something pretty incredible. You worked hard at something.
Well, which is what I'm saying. I would never speak about that, is what I'm saying.
Right. You think at some point you'll get to the place where you look back on it and can feel proud of what you accomplished?
I am proud of what I accomplished. Like, I got to an elite level. I did what I said I was going to do, and I got over a lot of obstacles in the way. So yeah, I am proud of it, but that doesn't, just because I'm proud of what I did doesn't necessarily mean I want it to be part of my identity. Like, I don't view tennis players as anything that I want to be, at least the ones I know. So, and you know, I was treated differently as a tennis player than as a DJ, and it's a no-brainer for me that I wouldn't want to be, you know, I wouldn't want that kind of stapled on or carried with me, because like there's always going to be kind of a negative aspect to it too.
For you.
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the things you just said is what's interesting to me, and you know, having your identity wrapped up in being a tennis player. And it's something I've written about and talked about quite a bit over the years, is, you know, being really careful that as we raise our kids in this sport, that they aren't the sport, right? They are much more than just a tennis player. And
which is a good parenting move, a bad tennis parenting move. Because I'm more aware than all the kids who were taught to be their sport. You know, they were able to stay in tennis and stay tunnel vision looking at tennis, and then, you know, they pop out of college and then they're screwed. But as a parent, like a parent move doing that, you've allowed me to kind of see past that, and that it's not the only thing out there, and be able to hone in on other skills, which help to the tennis, but were not necessarily because of the tennis.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I think that's a big challenge for parents. You know, we worry that we're investing all this time and money and whatever in helping our kids reach whatever their goal is in the sport. We want to avoid having them burn out in the sport, because that's disappointing. You know, if you had come to me at age 15 and said, I'm ready to quit, I can tell you I would have been really sad. When you did it in college, I was really sad. You know, it was a hard thing to hear.
I'm pretty sure I did it. Like, I'm pretty sure I did that multiple times from like ages 15 to 19.
Yeah, but it was kind of,
and it was always a fight. Yeah,
it was a fight. And then I don't know whether you saw the light or you were just throwing your hands up and saying, I'll do what you want. It makes life easier. I'm not sure which is the truth of what happened, but what I find difficult from the parent side, and I don't know if you'll remember this, but your junior year of high school, one of your teammates and buddies, who was a year ahead of you, announced that he was not going to play tennis in college. He was going to go to college and join a frat and have the college life, but he had been a really good player. Yeah. And you and I both were like, God, why is he doing that? He's worked so hard all these years. Why would he stop playing now? And looking back, you know, with my hindsight, that was probably a really good decision on his part.
Well, it's funny though, because I'm almost positive, I don't really keep in touch with him, but like the last time I saw, like, I'm pretty sure he was like playing, not like competitively, but like would get out and play.
Right.
Which is the difference. He probably has some regrets of doing that, whereas I went in, found out I hated it, and now I have no regrets of quitting.
Right.
You know, he probably, like, I can't speak for him obviously, but like that's what I've seen with other guys. You know, they leave early, then they're gonna have the thoughts of what if, you know, if you just do it and you hate it, then you quit, then you're not going to have that what if. It's always like, oh, thank God.
But at the same time, if he's still playing tennis and you're not, like, what's the right call there? And I feel like at some point in the future, you'll pick up a racket, whether it's with Jack or whether it's with your uncle or with a buddy or when you have kids or whatever. But
they will not play tennis, just on record.
Not at that. And that was going to be my next question. You don't think you would guide your kid? What?
Absolutely not.
Sports in general?
If they want to play, but they will.
Wait, you cut out there. Wait, you cut out there for a second. So you said if they want to play what?
If they want to play sports, they can, but they will not play tennis. Of course, if they're like dying to play tennis, then sure. But I'm not going to promote it, and I'll be very honest about my experience about it with them. So I don't see why they would want to.
Do you think there's a difference in playing at an elite level like you came up versus the kids who just played high school tennis for fun and, maybe went out on the courts? And
yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, would you be okay with that?
Sure, if they want to just do it as a hobby, but I'm assuming they're going to have obsessive personalities like me and kind of destroy the ability to have hobbies.
You still have hobbies. You do? No?
I like music was a hobby, and then I dove kind of head first into it, and now it's like a side job. So
right. And hopefully one day will be not a side job if things go well, right?
Right. And just because it's not a hobby doesn't mean I don't love it. But just saying, like, if they want to play tennis as a hobby, go for it. But I highly doubt that they would want to play tennis competitively after listening to me.
You may change. You don't know. But right now you don't see it as happening. I mean, I respect that. I do.
It won't. Like, I can guarantee you, I'm a 23-year-old man. Like, I know my thoughts on growing up playing tennis and, play a sport competitively. Sure, if that's what you want to do. I'll be honest about playing competitive sports too. Like, I think it's silly, but if you want to play a sport competitively, go for it. Just, I think all of them are better options than tennis.
You felt like it was tough because of the individual nature of it? Because of what? Like, why is it different than playing, let's say, soccer at a high level?
Well, first of all, just growing up as as a young boy, like you're viewed by your peers in like kind of a disrespectful manner for being a tennis player. Like tennis.
I think that's right.
Tennis is not perceived as a guy sport growing up. It's perceived as a wussy sport. Even though, if you look at statistics on paper, like I used to argue with people till, their ear would fall off, to a certain extent until I realized that people just wouldn't understand. But tennis requires a lot more than every other sport, basically. The physical aspect, the actual distance you're running in a match, the workouts required, the commitment afterwards, like it's just everything. So, you'd get into all these kind of petty arguments growing up with people who just like were soccer players, for instance. And, soccer is on the opposite end of the spectrum. If you're a soccer player, you're like, ooh, he's a soccer player. But if tennis, it's like, ugh. So, that's one piece of it.
Yeah.
But, other than that, like, I don't know. It's kind of a toxic sport to be in from every experience that I've seen, unless you're like top of the top, it's a toxic sport. Because
why?
The dynamics of the recruiting, the dynamics of being in tournaments, the gossip, like part of that I'm sure was due to being in the South, but, I think it is general tennis thing as well that, look at the demographic. It's a lot of rich white kids, which, I am, but I don't identify as like one of those stuck up rich white kids that I would play tennis with. And then the parents behind that. It's like, it's a whole thing. It's very like a bunch of little cults together. I don't know.
That's harsh.
Yeah, that's how it was though. I mean, like, it was terrible. Think of all the like the arguments that we would get into, like the things I would say to parents, the things parents would say to me. Like, you remember all that? Like
I
at
do.
tournaments after losses,
Yeah.
after like people would cheat. Like, I mean, it's horrible. That was the other thing is like kind of goes back to how people view it. It doesn't get much respect in terms of like actual respect, but also attention money wise. So, you're playing all these high level tournaments with, 85-year-old refs who can't see a line to save their life, yet they're deciding, a crucial point, in a tournament that you've trained the last 6 months for.
Right.
I mean, that doesn't happen in any other sport. Like, yes, there are referees, but like, they're people who are actually in the sport, and they're young, can see, and they're being paid. Like, all the refs at tournaments are like volunteers basically. So there's not really anything to keep everything in order, and the rules of the game are just stupid. Like, you got to be well, it is. I mean, it goes back to like, it's just viewed in a different way, and it's partially because of the rules of tennis. You're not allowed to be yourself on a tennis court. You get fined for throwing your own tennis racket. It's the stupidest thing in the world. Like, that's your $200 racket. If you want to throw it. Why are you going to get suspension points that might boot you out of the system, right?
Well,
that doesn't happen in other sports, is what I'm saying.
I don't know enough about other sports to know if that's true, but I will say, tennis has a history of being a gentleman's sport, right? So
A white gentleman's sport.
True. But there were particular rules and things etiquette wise and whatever that have always traditionally been part of the sport. And I think, I agree with you that some of the rules are outdated and need to be changed. And I think that's one of the things that's happening, honestly, right now with COVID-19 shutting everything down. There's a lot of conversation around what needs to change to make the sport more attractive and relevant and all of that to draw more people in. But I think there are a lot of kids that came up feeling like you felt, and, where they felt like their personalities were being stifled, where they were put in situations where things were taken out of their control, even though they had put the effort into, competing, and you were being asked to compete at this high level, yet to, maintain this emotional disconnect from it, which is counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's part of it too.
A good point on that is like how filtered you have to be on the court, and
right.
Like, in terms of just even cussing. Like any other sport, like they monetize off that in football and baseball. Like, they'll mic up the players and create a whole series off of that.
Right.
Like that's a thing. Like, it's appeal to the public. Tennis, you yell hell, you're going to get dinged, and it's going to be maybe 1, maybe 3 suspension points. It's just like, I don't know. And especially in the South too, you'd say Jesus and you'd get a suspension point. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, it was rough out there. And for somebody who, like you, grew up in a house where we didn't filter, we don't filter so much, that was especially challenging, I think, and frustrating, because...
Which goes on what you're saying about kind of stifling people's personalities.
Right. And I think, we had a home where freedom of expression was encouraged, and not necessarily punished. Sometimes you would get in trouble for certain things, but it was more, we encouraged y'all to express yourselves in whatever way worked, as long as you weren't hurting anybody. Right. And junior tennis, and to be passionate, for sure. And junior tennis at the time you were playing, and even still, I suppose, doesn't really allow that to happen so much, which does make it tough for somebody who does have that, kind of internal exuberance that doesn't want to hold it in. And listen, I
Tennis
will
isn't
be
a leader sport. That's just like the plainest way to put it. You have to be a sheep to play tennis at that level. You're always following some rules that don't apply to the outside world. If you're playing tennis, like, you step outside and you're like, oh wow, this is different.
I mean, yes and no, but I think that part of it too is, for somebody like you and for somebody like me who has trouble saying, that rule is dumb, but I'm going to follow it anyway because it's the rule. You and I aren't good at that, right? We say the rule is dumb and then we go on to explain why the rule is dumb and and decide we're not going to follow it because it's dumb. It makes things difficult in a sport like tennis where there are specific rules that you have to follow, and not just rules of play, but rules of behavior and rules of how to comport yourself on the court and things like that. Right. And I think some people thrive on that, and for them, it's a great choice, but maybe you would have been better served playing something different or doing something different with your time growing up. I don't know. I feel like growing up in sports has, made you health conscious. You take pretty decent care of yourself most of the time. It has helped you hone your competitive spirit and your desire to be the best at whatever it is you are looking to do. I feel like it helped you because you always had goals with your tennis and, were able to work toward those goals. And that's helped you in your music. You have goals with that and with your work. So, I think there are some positives that come of it. I know it's funny because I've been hesitant to have you come on and talk. And before we went on air, you asked me, how honest do you want me to be on this? And I said, I want you to be honest. I think it's important for people to hear your story and your side of things coming up in the sport, understanding that your college experience wasn't the fairy tale college experience that we were led to believe it could be. And that's colored some things, and that, you've found some other interests along the way that kind of steered you in a different direction, which in my opinion is positive. I love the man you've become. I love the passions you're pursuing. I'm proud of your success in your job, and I'm proud of the way you went about getting your job. So I think somebody just commented that this is sad listening to you, but I don't think it's sad. I think
where do you see comments?
If you're on Facebook, you can see them. I don't know where you are, but I don't view it as
that's the issue. That's the funny thing right there, is that tennis people are so in their bubble that they want to reject this type of stuff. They don't want to hear it. And it's actually pretty common.
But I think common. Yes, yeah. And I think it's important, and that's why I'm saying when you asked me how honest, and I said be honest, this is why, because I think people need to hear your story and understand, what your experience was in the sport. It doesn't mean everybody's experience is that way, but I don't view your story as a sad story. I view it as a really positive story, because look what you're doing now.
Yeah. I wouldn't change a thing. Like looking back, I'm going to be brutally honest and say I didn't enjoy it, and that, overall my experience was not great, but I'm happy where I am now. And I believe that I wouldn't be where I am now with the mentality I have now if it weren't for getting over that hump, which was tennis, just because I don't know, it's just like a hardship that you have to come over. That's how I view it. Well, it was a long experience, and you grow from every single experience you have, whether it be good or bad. And the longer, the more fruitful the growth is going to be. you know?
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. And I feel like, especially what you went through in college and, having a rough freshman year and having your parents tell you they're not going to continue to fund your college experience without the tennis, and you figuring out how to transfer and doing the things you did to get yourself back on your feet, all are things that have served you already and will continue to serve you in your life. And it stunk at the time. I mean, it was miserable going through some of that stuff for you and for us, but I think we've all grown from it and learned from it. And like I said, I think, the lessons you gleaned from your tennis and your school and transferring and your coaching relationships, good ones and the bad ones, have all, like you said, made you into who you are.
yeah.
And that person is someone that I'm proud to call my kids. So,
Thanks.
no, you're welcome.
I think, it's just that I don't know. It's hard to put it into words, but I feel like the weight of the experiences that I've been through were heavier and earlier than a lot of my peers will experience the same type of feeling. I'm not saying the actual experience of transferring and, doing this and that was like so crazy. It's not like there was a big death or like a big injury I had to overcome or some like huge, like in the grand scheme of things, terrible thing,
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like how those things would affect somebody, the stuff that I went through affected me, and I kind of grew in that same way and earlier. So it kind of came out to my benefit to go through all that crap.
Right. All right. Well, let's wind this up because I told you 45 minutes and it's been over an hour. So if people want to listen to your music, tell them how to find you.
You can look up soundcloud.com/stonemusic with a Z, or you can go to my Twitter and Instagram, which is it's /Morgan_Stone with 3 E's, and all the links to all my music will be there.
Okay. And they're all over my social media too, because I always retweet and repost and reshare all your stuff, right?
Yep, all over your page as well.
Well, thanks for doing this. I know you have to get back to work, and hopefully your boss hasn't been keeping a stopwatch on you for your lunch break.
Yeah, let's hope not. But thanks for having me. Glad to talk.
Yeah. Well, thanks those of you who tuned in. I hope you found this enlightening or helpful in some way, and I hope you don't consider it sad. I don't.
Did you see the comments after? They're like,
yeah,
selfie.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, I think it was a good conversation to have, and I appreciate you taking time to do it. And I miss you. I'll be happy to see you again when all this garbage is over.
Yeah, I miss you too.
Okay.
And, thanks for being a good parent. And, it's cool what you're doing with the blog.
Thanks. All right. Love you. Mwah.
Love you too. Bye.
All right. Bye.